It suffered a lot of scandals showing what was really going on. I'm looking on my computer screen right now at some polling information I obtained under the Freedom of Information Act that a Green group said they gave to David Axelrod. And in it, they say, look, don't talk about global warming. They say, keep the focus on preventing pollution that harms people's health. I have another memo, an internal memo to EPA saying the same thing. We can't make it about polar bears anymore. Make it about your neighbor's inability to breathe.
Horner made his comments on Sandy Rios in the morning on AFR Talk. Defense Secretary Ash Carter says al-Qaeda's most feared branch is taking advantage of chaos in Yemen. More from Sagar Magani.
Yemen's central government has collapsed, and Carter says that makes it harder for the U.S. to carry out counter-terror operations against AQAP, al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula.
You see them making great gains on the ground.
Carter says the upheaval's forcing the U.S. to rethink how it keeps AQAP from striking Western targets, including the American homeland.
We have to do it in a different way. But we do, and we are.
Meantime, the U.S. is speeding up weapons deliveries to the Saudi-led coalition, launching airstrikes against Houthi rebels in Yemen. Sagar Meghani at the Pentagon.
Abortion clinics belonging to a discredited New Jersey abortionist are under new ownership. Charlie Butts reports there's no proof that has happened, though.
Stephen Brigham had his medical license revoked in New Jersey for running an illegal late-term abortion scheme and, according to law, had to divest ownership in 8 abortion clinics in the state. Information indicates the clinics have been turned over to his longtime friend, Vikram Kaji. Operation Rescue's Cheryl Sullinger tells AFN that's a problem.
He has a long history of sexually abusing his patients. In 2013, the authorities in New Jersey found all kinds of violations at clinics where Kaji was working, and they found that he had suffered a stroke, that he had memory impairment, and also an impairment in his vision.
Operation Rescue considers it unbelievable that Haji is allowed to practice medicine.
Brigham may be using Kaji as a kind of a placeholder, kind of a pawn in the scheme to not totally give away control of his clinics, so that in the event that his license revocation appeal is somehow successful, that he can regain control of those clinics.
Sullinger adds that Operation Rescue has found no public record of transferring ownership to Haji. I'm Charlie Butts.
Kansas Governor Sam Brownback has signed a bill that would ban the practice of dismembering babies in the womb. Kathy Ostrowski of Kansans for Life was there.
This was solidly supported in our House and Senate with a groundswell of public support. When the public learned that little babies were being torn apart while living inside the mother's womb by abortionists, they were outraged. And we are looking forward to it going into effect July 1.
Kansans for Life fully expects abortionists to file suit to block the bill, but Ostrowski is confident the law will stand the test. 40% of medium-haul flights have been canceled in France because of an air traffic controller strike.
France's air traffic controllers are striking because of a quarrel over working and retirement conditions. Part of the dispute concerns the raising of the retirement age for controllers from 67 to 69 years. In a statement, the Air Traffic Controllers Union says disruption is expected over the whole country today. France's main airline, Air France, reports that long-haul flights would not be affected, but that only about 60% of medium-haul flights from and to Paris's main airport would go ahead. Paris's second-largest airport, Orly, is also affected. I'm Charles Ledesma.
U.S. stocks are higher as investors wait for the release of minutes from the Federal Reserve's latest meeting later today. Benchmark U.S. crude oil is down almost $1.50 to about $52.50 a barrel. American Family News is online and on the One News Now mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
In this day of economic uncertainty and soaring unemployment, safe investments are often hard to find. But investing in the precious metals is the safest investment of all because gold and silver is real money. Government-printed currency is not. Call Melody Cedarstrom at Discount Gold and Silver Trading Company at 1-800-375-4188. Melody has been helping people secure their financial future for over 10 years. While others in the business claim honesty, Melody will deliver. Give her a call, 1-800-375-4188. That's 800-375-4188.
Years ahead of the dominant media, FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net.
Okay, welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this April 7th, Tuesday, 2015 day on our calendar. I'm your host, Greg Anthony, and you're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. You can catch my show every Monday through Friday. That's on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. You can also get the reruns on Liberty Radio Live. You can get them also on ArcticBeacon.com, as well as several AM stations across the South and selected shows that are put on shortwave. Okay, today I'm going to get back to the Tony Alamo case, and, well, let's look at the aspects. I did a 3-part series that was put up on YouTube, and that was basically talking in general about the whole case to get people to look at some of my other stories, which if you go to my website at Arctic Beacon, or if you go to the archives of First Amendment Radio, you can get all the shows I've done over the last 7 months or so. And you can also go back and see the shows I did prior to the raid in 2008 in Falk, Arkansas, on this ministry, this Christian ministry. And you can go to my shows that were done with Tony prior to that, even a year or two prior to that, as well as what happened afterwards, and then the most recent shows in the past 7 months or so, which is really going in depth into this case to show you that he basically has been persecuted for over 40 years because his Christian ministry, which was very successful, by the way, and had churches in California, Arkansas, New York, and a couple other places. And for 40 years he's been preaching that the Vatican basically is the Antichrist in the Bible. As the Reformers, Martin Luther, the Reformers in the Protestant world back when it was the Protestants weren't taken over like they are in America but through the ecumenical movement, where basically everybody bows to Rome again. But Tony's ministry didn't do that. And so for 40 years they've tried to basically harass him. He's been attacked in numerous areas. The IRS, I went over his case where he was put in jail for 4 years for IRS violations that were bogus. Similar to Tupper Sassi, the writer of Rulers of Evil, who I'm also featuring. And you see the same pattern there. And he, of course, also was a big, Jesuit Vatican critic, as was Tony. And believe me, I think this was the major reason why it went down. Now, what happened, it was a 3-prong approach in this final attempt to shut him down. And there was this big, huge raid in 2008 on a ministry where they found 6 or 7 children playing on a swing, and they had to take them into custody. Tony wasn't even there, and they knew that. But that began the process of, one, they used the Mann Act to convict Tony. Now he's in jail for 175 years. I mean, it's incredible when you look at the charges against him, and we've gone over that. Now, the question I ask is, why did they use the Mann Act, which is normally not used in cases of people that... his ministry, they would go on trips across state lines. They'd go from one church to the other. And instead of charging him with straight child abuse, which is basically, what they said in court, but using the Mann Act, because the Mann Act is a very flimsy way to do it, because this is an old law that was set up to basically, it was set up because they used to, to get pimps who were taking women across state line for sexual purposes. And that was the history of it, and it goes way back, a lot of years in the past. But they used this, and they said he was going across state lines with these Christian trips, which makes it a lot easier to convict somebody. But how they did this was over, the guy's been doing, I've talked to so many people at his ministry that said there was nothing going on. And they found 4 or 5 girls, and basically the testimony is so flimsy. And then when you see how they were treated, they were taken to a counseling center where they were promised gifts, then they were all, promised gifts, promised all these things, employment, etc. And they had numerous meetings. I mean, I've gone over a deposition that was done regarding trying to get to the bottom of all this, and it's amazing. I listened to a deposition of one sergeant in the Arkansas. I read a deposition of one sergeant in the Arkansas State Police, and then of one of the FBI investigators. And they're so vague. It's amazing how they just don't want to get to the bottom and answer questions. I mean, how are you going to ever find the truth out? And they didn't want the truth to come out. But somebody wrote about it, there was only testimony of 5 girls that were bribed, and this is written about by a person that knew what was going on in the trial at the time, and given gifts to testify against Pastor Alamo. You can be assured that the evidence which they don't have is in fact false, he said. The jury went as far as asking the judge if they could convict him even though there was no evidence. It was amazing. And I called it worse than a kangaroo court. And I said all kangaroos wouldn't want their name associated even with this case. Because, boy, it was a frame job. And during deliberations, the jury sent a note to the judge, which read in part, "We don't understand the definition. They didn't understand the guidelines for conviction." The judge answered, "I can't answer that question. Please refer to instructions." Nothing but death will stop, though, this man who knows Pastor Alamo from continuing to get out the Word of God. In fact, at 75, and that's what he was when this was written, while legally blind and under terrible conditions, Pastor Alamo has written over 170 tracts in jail. Some are already posted on his website. And I checked out their website, and they're still getting over 300,000 hits a week. So, and many, many from all over the world. It's, and people want to know this stuff. But I hope my shows help to get the other side of the story out. And we have dedicated some to really the trial and and how this basically was set up to really finally, because they've tried to get him in jail, permanently for many, many years. And I've had a couple FBI former undercover agents who testified on my show that, hey, listen, we know that he hasn't done anything, but we were told to frame this guy, basically. And that's what they said. One guy even came on, John Peeler, and apologized. And this was before Tony was in jail, apologized to him on the air for what he did. And we got into the whole story of Peeler. But was this allowed into the court? No. Why? It seems relevant to me. So anyway, one of the aspects was to get him in jail forever so that he would stop this. The Vatican really doesn't. If you look into the ecumenical movement, they're trying to wipe out any ministry that talks against them or doesn't fall in line with the Pope. It's that simple. And today, a couple days ago was Easter, which is, every Easter the Pope makes, has a big speech, and on Fox News or on CNN they were covering it. So I have to mention this before I get to this case. And because I find it so hypocritical, because it is the Vatican and the Jesuit order who have always been involved in fomenting revolutions, including this war on terror. And the big message was from CNN that, first of all, they prefaced it with saying the Pope is the most popular man in the world. He has a 90% approval rating. I mean, what is he, a politician? And then they did a poll stating that the Pope is more popular in America than Congress. That's not hard, because 60% of the people think Pope Francis is doing a wonderful job, while only 6% think the Congress is. Okay. Well, here's the deal. People in America are making a big mistake, because the Pope actually runs the Congress, and so he's part and parcel of that. So why do you like him? You like him because he gets up and says things like this. He gets up and says he gave a speech. All right, and here's what his speech was. And then they say, well, remember, the Vatican is the only religion that has diplomatic relations with, has a diplomatic corps and diplomats, because they're recognized all over the world as a city-state, too. What is this? Don't people get it? You know, you ever been to the Vatican? I mean, I walked through there for 7 years. I know it's might as well. It's no bigger than look. The farm that I grew up on was bigger than the Vatican. I think it's only 108 acres. Our farm was 250 acres. I should have started a city-state. You know, if they can do it, why can't we? It's incredible. I mean, when you go into that, it's like a football field, and it's a city-state, and they got, incredible what goes on there. It's a great place to money launder, too, in their bank, and we've done stories on that. But anyway, the Pope gets up and says he prays for peace all over the world, and hopefully his message will help. And, I don't know how, he's such a, it's so hypocritical and two-faced, and that's the way they are, and people believe it. And then he's commenting also on the nuclear, we've supposedly now are in the early stages of reaching an agreement with Iran on a nuclear agreement so that we can control their nuclear weapons so they don't blow up the world. And it's considered very weak by many people. And also Israel has come out and say that they're trying to block this thing, put on a full court press, they said, to get, to tell Congress, listen, this thing is not going to help. It's basically going to allow Iran to continue doing, building nukes and blowing us up while we get rid of the sanctions on Iran. So basically, it's a lukewarm agreement, according to him and according to many people. But what you expect from Obama, who's basically allowing this big buildup and proliferation in the Middle East to create a big war. And that's why we have a dove in office now. But we did have a big hawk in office right after 9/11, right? Bush was ready to blow up the whole world. In fact, he got on a ship, and he actually called it a crusade. You don't think the Vatican's involved? So, I mean, that's just one thing, about the Pope. But there's many, many more things. And Tony, when you go back and look at what he talked about, he brought up many, many things that are very interesting about why the Vatican is involved in controlling our diplomatic relations in this country and controlling our foreign and domestic policy and basically turning the world into a one-world government, one-world order. And he was an outspoken critic. That's why I got to know him, because I was looking for people that understood what was going on here, because when I came back from Rome, I found America to be 99.9% dumbfounded about any of these things that many Europeans already knew about, So anyway, that's how I got to know Tony, and it's really sad to see what's happened to him. But the point I'm trying to get at is they're after anybody that has a ministry that talks against the Vatican in a similar way that they were during the Inquisition. But they're doing it a little more sophisticated now. They're using the government. Well, they always used the Romans, I guess, and all governments back then too. But they're really using, all of their resources in America to get these people out of the picture, so to speak. So we'll leave Tony's why the criminal charges him, we'll leave for another time to continue on certain things in that trial, which I haven't been able to. There's an enormous amount of information, and I try to cover as much as I can. But the second prong approach here was to basically disband the people that were in the ministry, that lived there, work there, help do all the, pass out all the brochures that they sent regarding, the Bible and regarding the Vatican, etc. And so they had to figure out a way to do that, and the best way to do that was just to take the children into custody, saying that they were all in danger. And, man, the first day at the raid, they took 6 kids. Then the next day, the judge issued an order to round them all up all over the country, and so they ended up with, 35 or 40. And also, you can imagine many parents just head for the hills because they didn't want to lose their kids, so they're trying to break up the ministry from that point of view. Now, the point is, when looking into this, I found that there was no abuse charges, and the children were living quite well, better than they were after they were put into foster care. And these years later now, parents haven't seen their children. are not allowed to talk to them. What a travesty. So that aspect of the case I'm going to deal with today on certain things that I haven't covered. Then the third one, of course, is the taking of their property in civil cases, which is going on as we speak, and that is a huge story. In fact, there was one settlement in Arkansas, the largest in Arkansas history, $513 million against this ministry because of their land holdings in Arkansas, California, etc. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. So they're trying to take it all. Basically, what I told you, the Vatican's involved with taking your mind, body, and soul. That's what they want. And this case proves it. Now, let's look at a couple things here to get back to the kids. There's a family by the name of the Krantzes. They've lost 6 children in this, and they've been with the ministry for over 35 or 40 years. And I always start out, there's a letter they sent me a while back in September of 2014, which kind of gets us into this idea of what's really going on. Then I'm going to go back to some articles that were written about the lawsuits that were filed against the state for taking all these children, and you'll find that it was not dealt with properly. And when you read some of the depositions of these people that took these kids, it's amazing, some of the testimony, some of the vagueness that these police officers, I don't know how they sleep at night. They're hiding information, won't testify to the truth. You know, did you interview people? Well, I don't know. Did you take notes on the interview? Well, I don't remember. It goes on and on. But anyway, Mr. Krantz then said, Greg, you asked me for more information. And there is one piece I'm thinking of as I am listening to you talk about the case and people being harassed and hounded to help convict Pastor Tony. I personally wasn't close to any of the females involved in the suit or conviction. I'm one of the parents who lost 6 children to that federal effort. The FBI agent Randall Harris, who headed harassment and was actually coaching the prosecution witnesses at Pastor Alamo's trial, was at just about all of my court hearings. Now, these parents got together and tried to get their children back, of course, and there were many. Early on in my case, my lawyer approached me, offering that if I would cooperate with the FBI, basically lie, and help convict Pastor Alamo, that I would have my children back in a week. But I refused to cooperate. I've known him for 35 years at the time, and knowing that he was being framed on false charges. The secret child court ran its course. I couldn't testify against him and lie. The secret child court ran its course and terminated my parental rights, even though there wasn't one shred of evidence that any of my children had been ever abused in any way. Since the stealing of the children by the DHS is a 2-step process, adjudication and termination, I had to appeal both processes to the Arkansas Supreme Court and then the United States Supreme Court. That's 4 separate high court appeals. Both higher courts rubber-stamped the lower court's decision without addressing any of the issues appealed. Instead, they echoed the unsubstantiated accusation used in the lower court, which of course was also echoed by the media. I used to wonder, he says, how the German people could have suffered Hitler's slaughter of so many innocent Jews. But now it's very clear to me how it's done. And the courts and media were very efficient tools to demonize the Jews. And I might add, just the way they demonize these Christian people, to the point that the general public hated them and believed they deserved to be exterminated. This, by the way, is very analogous to the process used to crucify our Lord Jesus. Betrayal, false witnesses, corrupt judicial system, manipulation of the masses, murder. Very poignant letter, and I needed to start off with that because this family lost 6 children to this kangaroo court. I don't like doing that to the kangaroos, but it's a good way to explain it. I'm telling you, when you see how they did this, it's amazing. They tried to fight back, and we forget about this sometimes, so I went back and I looked up some of the things that were going on during that period of time. And in the second half hour, I'm going to go and talk about that, what really went on through in a couple of articles that were written, and I want to pull that up and we can start on that. I also want to mention, there's an article I want to bring up that I found And this was its headline: Government Racketeering, Child Protective Services, DHS judges involved, our children were kidnapped and now sold. And this came from the desk in 2008, right around this time, of Nancy Schaefer, 50th District of Georgia, November 16, 2007, updated in 2008. And in this report, she's focusing on the Georgia Department of Family and Children's Services. But she says, however, I believe, and this is analogous to Arkansas, I believe that protective services nationwide has become corrupt and that the entire system is broken, almost beyond repair. The Alamo case is a good story. And she says she's convinced parents and families should be warned all over the nation of this problem. And that's what hopefully the show is doing. And she said, I'd witnessed the Gestapo at work, and I witnessed the deceitful conditions under which children were taken in the middle of night, out of hospitals, out of school buses, out of homes, parenting classes, anger management classes, counseling referrals, therapy classes, and on, demanding of parents with no compassion by the system, even while they were at work and while their children are separated from them. I'm going to get back to more of that article, but that lays the groundwork of what's going on, my goodness, all over the country. And not only in the Alamo situation is a perfect example of that, isn't it? And there's a great quote by one of these people in this case, and I've got to go to this. Let me do it at the break, because it really outlines what these people really think. Because this one caseworker said something in the Alamo case that is just amazing to me, how they were ridiculing the Bible. And I'll get you that quote after the break. That'll give you a good reason to come back. But another good reason to come back is, I'm going to go over this article that the parents of these children seized from the Alamo ministry. They filed lawsuits to try to get their children back. And I'm looking at a picture of the Krantz family and all their kids, and it's a beautiful family. And I know I've talked to these people many times, and they brought up, and look, I've met a lot of these people at the ministry, and some, personally, and I looked into it, and man, they were leading a great life. I mean, they were bringing up their children in a wholesome environment, teaching Christian values, working in many different capacities in a very helpful way to the community, etc., etc. But, if you talk against the Vatican, forget it. You're going to be, can't tell the truth anymore when it comes to the Bible, right? You can't be like the Reformers back in, when Protestantism really told you the truth about Roman Catholicism and what it was all about. But that can't exist anymore in America, because that same guy that gave that speech about peace, calls himself the Christ on earth, which is that's one of my biggest pet peeves, and that really is how they use Christ and God. They hide behind them and use them for their nasty purposes. And like I said, he's quoting peace on Easter when he's actually fomenting war. That's the way they operate. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
Hear it first on FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net. The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on Internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis. as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the Internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening. Gold and silver is tremendously undervalued. Global demand vastly exceeds mine supply by more than 60% annually. There is little in the financial world more certain than a coming explosion in the prices of gold and silver. The U.S. dollar continues to lose value and respect as the world's reserve currency. Our nation faces challenges on many fronts, and a day doesn't pass without another economist bringing forth warnings of impending economic calamity. There has never been a better time than right now to acquire physical gold and silver. Discount Gold and Silver Trading was founded on the principles of truth and honesty. We believe in providing a quality product, quality service, and most importantly, competitive pricing. We provide all forms of precious metals, including American gold, silver, platinum, and rare investment and circulated coins. Silver bars, rounds, and 90% silver bags are on hand for the silver investor. Gold self-directed IRAs are available. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, that's 1-800-375-4188.
Okay, we're back for the second half hour of the Investigative Journal on this April 7th, 2015 day on our calendar. And I want to get right back to the kidnapping of these Alamo children, showing how this case really exemplifies how things have really spun out of control in this country. And parents, I'm telling you, this is an epidemic in child protective services all over the country. And I'm using this case also to show you what can happen when you don't walk the party line, so to speak. And we'll get right back to it. Now, look at the arrogance of this woman, Sherry Funk, who worked with the DHS in Arkansas and was in on the planning meeting of taking up all these children and taking them away from their parents on the Alamo raid in 2008. Her response was, yes. You know what she said then? She said, the Lord giveth, but the DHS taketh away. This statement was made by DHS employee after the mass removal of the children from the parents who belong to the Tony Alamo ministry. All right, so let's get back to this case and what really happened. So we've detailed it on this show where they came in like a stormtrooper, scared the heck out of these poor kids, 6 years old and up, some even younger, seeing this, guns pointed at them. One girl said she had, the laser pointed at her. I mean, incredible stuff. That in itself should be a assault violation. But are you going to, give me a break? And so back then, the story was covered, and it's noted in several articles that back then, after this occurred, the parents really, they've lost all their children. There are many of them, ones that didn't lose them, were heading for the hills, their lives disrupted. One day, everything's going fine. The next day, stormtroopers in your backyard. Now, the federal government has the right and responsibility to intervene in proceedings of the state of Arkansas against members of the Tony Alamo ministry because the state of Arkansas had violated, I believe, religious rights protected by the United States Constitution. And that's what the attorney for many of these parents was arguing back then. And if you think about it, it's trying to get when all of them work together, and you see that in this whole planning stage of this, we had the FBI working together with the policemen, with the DHS, all together. I mean, you think you're going to, although the feds could, you're supposedly supposed to get a redress of grievances, but when they all work together, it's pretty hard to do that. But that's in theory, what should happen. When you read the Constitution, I thought we had religious liberty in this country, but this case proves we don't. Now, the attorney back then, his name was Kuhn. Now, he was the attorney for the parents. Now, especially, and also for Krantz. And let's see, he was also for Scott Ciego, I believe. And others, I imagine. But these were two of the parents who lost children, were taken from them. Like I remember reading the Krantz letter. Well, they filed a response in September. And it was released to the press, to the Arkansas Department of Human Services motion to dismiss the lawsuit. This was released to the press. The Arkansas came back and they wanted to dismiss the lawsuit filed by Krantz and Ciego against the department. The lawsuit by Krantz and Ciego and the church asks that the United States District Court, Texarkana, step in and stop the state of Arkansas from infringing on their civil rights and liberties and get their children back. Now, you know already what happened. He's appealed this to the Supreme Court in both the federal and state, and has no and they just rubber stamped everything. But it's good to look back and see how they tried to fight back and see what really happened. But the state of Arkansas back then said the lawsuit violates the younger doctrine, which essentially says the government cannot interfere in state criminal, civil, and administrative proceedings. But Kuhn said, listen, it's got exceptions. And here we go with the legal wrangling, right? That the proceedings against his clients resulted in the loss of custody of their children, which requires his clients to quit their religious employment and move out of property owned by the church and obtain a change of life. And if they want to regain their children, this is what they have to do. And in the case of Krantz, he was even asked, he said basically behind the scenes, and I'm sure they lie about it, but I believe him. He said that if he lied about Tony Alamo, really, he'd get his kids back tomorrow. So what was the key here? They wanted to disband this ministry in any way possible. Lying didn't matter, but he couldn't. And Kuhn argued that this younger doctrine, the exceptions were requirements for the exceptions were met, and therefore the court is obligated to hear the lawsuit and grant some type of injunctive relief. Kuhn argues in his response, and we could go on and on with these legal exceptions, but anyway, he was trying his best to help these parents out. And he said the primary issue is that the case is whether defendants can urge upon a state court and enforce a policy that is a prerequisite to obtaining custody of their children. The plaintiffs, Krantz and Ciego, and other parents of the church must first leave church-supported housing and employment, or is this a less intrusive way? What's really going on here? They want to disband this ministry. And why? And I believe strongly, if they did not talk about the truth about the Vatican and things like that, this would never be going on. If they just said, we'll play ball with them and lie to our people, then we will basically be okay. And I don't think this would have ever happened. But that was not the case if you look at the history of what these people have tried to do to alert people. And I really admire them because it's a tough subject, man. People in this country just they can't get their head around how this operates. And it's because of the mass propaganda over the years that has gone on in both Hollywood and government. And it's incredible. He argued that the church's long-standing beliefs and practices and these state actions have violated the plaintiff's constitutional religious rights. And he said, really, the church was created and is structurally designed in conformity with the principles and practicalities of the first century Christian church according to the mandates of the New Testament book of Acts. Church furnishes its members who work full-time in the church with all of the material necessities, housing, clothing, transportation, food, education of children, medical services, in order to free the members' time for full-time service in the missionary work of the church. Plaintiffs believe Jesus is no part-time employees. And the members spend their days on the streets of America's cities handing out Christian literature, witnessing to people about Christ, studying their Bibles, praying and attending a nightly worship service. The Vatican does not want anybody out there spreading the word that they're not needed. That you don't have to go to a priest, you don't have to go to the Pope is not Christ on earth. And you don't have to do that. The Bible tells you can worship God. He's given an opportunity if you understand certain things in the Bible. And this is precious to the Western thinking and Western civilization is built. I mean, we call ourselves a Christian country, but are we? When we won't even allow Christians? And when Christians are depicted as cults? And the Vatican claims to be Christian when you look at the Roman Catholicism is not Christianity. It isn't. When you look at the way it's the canon law, when you look at the traditions, when you look at all these idol worship, it is so contrary to Christianity. But they're okay. They're not a cult, right? No. That's a whole mess here going on, and they're trying to straighten it out with the literature that they pass out. But you can't do that in America. Because this case shows there is no freedom of religion, there is no freedom of speech, and if you cross that line, you know the line that the Vatican draws in the sand, using the Arkansas Department of Human Services, the state governments, the state officials, the feds, is that once you do that, there is no freedom of speech. Showing you that we're on our way to a one-world religion under a false Messiah. Pope, Mr. Pope, I call him. And I call this guy Miss Pope Dr. Francisstein. Yeah. This new monster they created in the Vatican, making him out to look like a really loving, he loves the poor. He's trying to tell everybody, distribute your income to the poor. This is another way of saying, you guys pay for it. Why doesn't the Vatican distribute their income to the poor? Instead of money launder it to the mob, or money launder it, and I went through articles and shows about how much they really own. How much do we have to know about these people? Thank God there's ministries like them around still, but this is what they want to get rid of, folks. And this is why this whole thing is going on. And so they will spare no expense. They will not allow this case to get a fair trial because it was a setup from the beginning. And those undercover agents told you that. Now, so basically, there's a couple affidavits that Ciego and Krantz filed, and they explain the religious beliefs and the dilemma the Arkansas state has placed on them. He summarized it this way. The members, like the plaintiffs, who work full-time in the church have an abiding conviction that unless they live their lives in this manner, unless they work for Christ full-time each and every day, then they will lose their salvation and their souls will be condemned to everlasting punishment and separation from God. Once this belief system is fully understood, it becomes painfully obvious that if the plaintiffs and other members of the church are required to individually shoulder the burden of housing costs and meet the daily obligations of secular employment, they will have little time to practice their religion in the manner they choose. They cannot possibly work at a secular job 40 hours a week and travel to other cities to witness for Christ and hand out literature. They cannot possibly be distracted by the normal financial burdens of daily life in the hectic world we live in and maintain the same consistency and quality of service to Christ that they believe is absolutely necessary in order to preserve their eternal salvation. Thus, they are trapped in a horrible dilemma. What do they choose, the church or their children? In a free society, no one should be forced to make such a decision. You realize that? This decision is simply intolerable. But, they haven't seen their kids yet. It's 2015. The defendants do not seem to understand this dilemma. And they understand it, and they want to disband this ministry. He couldn't come out and say it. To insist that the parents leave the church in order to regain custody of their children simply because the defendants think the parents are not living correctly. That's basically what it is. When you looked at what they're saying, listen, it was interesting because in the end they couldn't really find any abuse. So that's the key to this whole story. They couldn't find child abuse here. So you know what they did? They said it is dangerous to school their parents, to school. I mean, if you looked at their educational system at that ministry, it was top notch. It was good. And these kids were actually learning. They're in an environment where they learn. The state said, no, we got to put you in these cesspool schools in the public arena, and that's good. Where drugs and, killings go, you know what goes on in public schools. And the state says that's better. Because, you can't have a wholesome environment in school like you guys do. And then they said, well, listen, they had to look for another reason. And then they got on this vaccination kick. And many people really still don't understand that many of these vaccinations are very dangerous. And many of these parents, I think rightfully said, I don't want my children to have this stuff put in their system. And they said, well, that is a danger to society and a danger. Yeah, just do some research on vaccination liberation and get out of that mindset that, the government has a right to stick needles in you. And look how many, what if you get a bad batch? I mean, it's incredible what's happening in that front. So they used that as well. They had to find something. But what was outlined right here is really the reason behind this. They wanted to, and I said it bluntly, they wanted to disband this ministry, and they had to look for any way possible to do it. So, this goes hand in hand. I may have to do another show tomorrow to finish this up. But remember I was reading to you earlier about the corrupt business of child protective services in the whole country? Well, here was a letter in 2009 sent by a person to the ministry, and they say, they kidnapped 3 of my children. My heart is heavy and totally grieved over the loss of so many children. Some days I feel as if I can't go on living, but I know I must with God's help. I can and will go on. I'm contending in prayer every day for you, for all the children, and for the entire body of Christ. We need a miracle from God. When I read in the Bible the vastness of God's power, I'm encouraged and I'm reminded to put my full trust in God and Him alone. I know the arm of the flesh will fail, but God will never fail. And she said this. She said, Tony, I do love your tenacity, bravery, and relentlessness in fighting these evil people. You're a shining testimony to me. I've enclosed some pictures for you. The pictures of Evan, 9, and Nathaniel were taken this summer when they were happy at home with us. In the picture of all of us on page 1 and the shelter, Nathaniel's little heart is broken because he can't go home with me. They are all dying to come home. I miss them dearly. And she had lost her children to Child Protective Services for no good reason. And remember, I was reading to you what was going on, from the Georgia legislature, and how this is an epidemic around. And basically, coming from the desk of Senator Nancy Schaefer from the 50th District of Georgia, she said this parenting, they put parents through these hoops. This can take months and years. Parents are victimized by the system that makes a profit from holding children longer and bonuses for not returning children. Caseworkers and social workers are oftentimes guilty of fraud. They withhold evidence, they fabricate evidence, and they seek to terminate parental rights, given bonuses for doing this. That's what's going on in Arkansas. You're seeing the Tony Lamo case is a perfect example. However, when charges are made against them, the charges are ignored. That's exactly what happened here in the Alamo case. The Adoption and Safe Families Act, set in motion by Clinton, oh, good deal, offered cash, well, listen what he did, offered cash bonuses to states for every child they adopted out of foster care. In order to receive the adoption incentive bonuses, local child protective services need more children. So Clinton passed a bill. Listen, you guys will get your federal money, but you got to get these kids. And you can even, we don't care if you lie, just take them away from the families. They must have merchandise, children, that sells, and you must have plenty of them so the buyer can choose. Some counties are known to give $4,000 bonuses for each child adopted and an additional $2,000 for special needs child. Employees work to help the federal dollars flowing. The National Center on Child Abuse and Neglect reported that in 98, that 6 times as many children died in foster care than in general public. And that once removed to official safety, these children are far more likely to suffer abuse, including sexual molestation, than in the general population. That's what happened here in the Alamo case. According to the California Little Hoover Commission report, in 2003, 30 to 70% of children in California group homes do not belong there and should not have been removed from their homes. 70%? The system cannot be trusted. It does not serve the people. It obliterates families and children simply because it has the power to do so. Now remember what Proverbs says. Proverbs 31, 8, 9. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and the needy. Amazing. Where's the constitutional? They're trying to break up not only Christian ministries, but the family too. And this is a way to do it. You pass a law stating, listen, the more kids you can adopt, we don't care, you get some money. And the more money, and if you don't, so that gives government incentive, the state incentive to lie, to use the system. And that's exactly what goes on. Now, how does it really work, the Child Protective Services? Here's a good example, okay? It says, most of the time I was taking their kids away for no good reason. A New York City protective service worker said, all it takes to begin the potential destruction of a family is to call to one of the child protective hotlines in every state. The call can be made anonymously, making the hotlines potent tools for harassment. So if you don't like your neighbor, let's say your neighbor put up a fence you don't like, you can call hotline and say, hey, he's abusing his kids. I saw him spank his kids. They'll be out the next day, and you, as the parent, do not have any right to know who your accuser is. You may start looking around and, well, who doesn't like me here? But it could end up you lose your kids over, one, and that's how sometimes it works. And then you get the CPS workers who are taking kids for no good reason because they get incentives, money. You have a system that's out of control. The Alamo case is a perfect example. Though state laws generally encourage or require reports if you have reasonable cause to suspect maltreatment, but more often false allegations are well-meaning mistakes. They could be mistakes made by people who have taken the advice of child savers, so to speak, and these false allegations are misused, mishandled, and you end up losing your kids for no reason, and that's okay. Because everybody's getting their palms patted with money. The state laws generally, what did the state laws generally do? You see how they worked in the Alamo case. I only got a minute and a half here. And I'll maybe get back to this again. But why don't we end with that statement, because it's worth repeating. So Sherry Funk, in the DHS office here, in this case when all these Alamo children were taken from their parents, was asked if she was in on this big, huge planning meeting with the feds, with the state, police. Yes, I was there. We were planning the raid. And then she said, the Lord giveth, but the DHS taketh away. That explains it all, doesn't it? And I hope that you take these words and you listen a bit. Because what happened then, the parent, I read it earlier, I was giving you the basis of what they did. They tried to file to get their children back, and this was just legal rumblings. They've also asked for injunctive relief, meaning immediately turn over the kids. And they allege that Arkansas acted in bad faith, and they showed it acted in bad faith when removing these children en masse. And the Tony Alamo Ministries in 2 raids in the autumn of 2008. Generally, bad faith in this term means the bringing of a prosecution that has no hope of success, but the courts have expanded that definition to include prosecutions that are retaliatory in nature. That's what this was. Now, you think that the injunction was granted? Heck no. His arguments are compelling and complex and extensive, and the points were just ignored. And I'll go over some of those maybe tomorrow or the next day. But you got to realize it could happen to you. Okay, good night, and see you tomorrow.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host, Melody Cedarstrom, right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit DiscountGoldandSilverTrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, 1-800-375-4188. Hear it first on FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. A woman who was convicted of killing her son by poisoning him with salt has been sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. Lacey Spears of Scottsville, Kentucky was spared the maximum 25 years to life. Prosecutors asked for the maximum sentence, saying Spears sickened her son because she had a bizarre need for attention. Kansas Governor Sam Brownback has signed a bill that would ban the practice of dismembering babies in the womb. Kathy Ostrowski of Kansans for Life was there.
This was solidly supported